Hello there, thanks for coming by PosterCentral.com's video blog today. I'm Pete Howard, and this is a great piece of early Bay Area music history. I've been lucky enough to blog a lot of these lately, or at least record a lot of them lately, and I'll be putting them out over time. And this looks very plain and simple, doesn't it? I mean, it's all type. There's no art to it whatsoever. All it does is represent Bill Graham's first Fillmore concert. I have to say it again. Bill Graham's first Fillmore Auditorium dance concert. This is the handbill for it. You can see right at the top there, dance concert. It is, of course, the Mime Troupe benefit number 2. The handbill for appeals to, if you will, is the nickname. There's also a poster to this event, and of course, I'd rather have the poster than the handbill, but you take the cheaper handbill and say you can get a poster or whatnot, run across one. There is a poster for this that Bob Dylan did a press conference, and I think it was December of '65, to promote his concerts there. And Bill Graham actually pressed a copy of the poster into Dylan's hands as he was entering the press conference, and Dylan, at the end of his press conference, somebody asked him what that was, and he talked about the poster in the event. It was a public relations grand slam home run for new promoter Bill Graham. Well, what Graham and his girlfriend, secretary Bonnie McLean, did before people entered the room, before anybody did, is they went and they put this handbill on every seat. So all of the press in the Bay Area, and in fact all of Northern California and maybe Central California, was there to oogle Dylan and possibly ask him a question, and they all got a copy of this exact handbill. So it was great marketing for sure back then by Bill and company. Bill was the company in addition to Bonnie, his girlfriend, as I said. So this was the second of 3 consecutive benefits for the San Francisco Mime Troupe, and of course Graham was the treasurer and business manager before he broke away from them very early in '66 and went out and did his own thing. Now, unlike the first Mime Troupe Appeals benefit handbill, which I've also blogged, I don't know if I'm going to put it on before this, which had, poetry and different things like that. This is all music, or at least it's certainly all music that's billed. I'll just give you a quick top to bottom scan here. Fillmore Auditorium, that's amazing to see that. Bill Graham's name, by the way, is not on this, just the Fillmore. And underneath dance concert there, it's got 6 musicians listed and no, poets or anything like that. So you've got the Jefferson Airplane, you've got Great Society with Grace Slick, you've got the Mystery Trend on here as providing some of the music. You've got jazz man John Handy, and he was probably the first one mentioned, top billed there, if you will, of the 6, because he was probably the only one with a national reputation at that point. And you've got Sam Thomas and the Gentleman's Band, and interestingly unbilled, but performing here, according to Ralph J. Gleason's review in the Chronicle, was the Warlocks, very soon to become the Grateful Dead. So, Bill Graham's name surprisingly is not on here, but he wasn't, he knew just how to push things, didn't he, to be successful, but not push too hard where they would push back, and so he didn't have his name on either the poster or the handbill in this particular case. He was still gaining, it just wasn't quite the right time to do it, but it was for the next one, for Appeals 3 for sure. One thing neat about this first Bill Graham event, though, at the Fillmore, is that Graham, for the first time, met Chet Helms, and they were introduced to each other by John Carpenter. Now that's a magical meeting, because Bill Graham and Chet Helms would go on with for years with their BGP and FD, Family Dog events, and John Carpenter, who was the manager of the Great Society, would team up with Chet Helms, certainly for the first few months at least, in the Family Dog enterprise as it reformed in early '66 to put on the big official shows. So it's really neat that they first met at this event. And Graham, in his own book, his autobiography penned just before he died, talks about how at this first Fillmore show, the Appeals 2 benefit, he said there was 1 set of speakers, 1 set of monitors, and 1 roadie for each band, and that was about it. And he said we played records between the live sets, my records that he brought from home, things like Miles Davis, Latin music, jazz, Ravel's, bolero, stuff like that. And the purpose of this marketing piece, this handbill, is not only to spread the word, but it really also plays up the size of the Fillmore and saying, look, last time if you came to Appeals 1, you waited forever, a line around the block. He said, this is a much bigger hall, it should fit everybody, and so, come on down and we'll all have a good time and you won't have this interminable wait in line. So that's pretty neat. And it's kind of funny, this handbill also says, some of the entertainers will drop by after fulfilling their own commitments. So, wow, that's pretty cool, right? Some of the artists do a gig somewhere else and then come over here and do this one. But the flyer is still very political because the Mime Troupe was radically political, and all this text you see here, which you probably couldn't even read when I come in for the scan, it opens and it closes with references to Shakespeare's Hamlet, and it sort of, strongly chides the San Francisco Parks Commission for being so critical of the Mime Troupe and their, newly revamped radical presentation of Il Candelaio by Giordano Bruno, even though the handbill misspells him as Brano. And, the Mime Troupe was staging a commedia dell'arte version, which is like an Italian theater technique that uses masks and puppets and improvisation. But basically the ultra-conservative Parks Commission, which is hard to believe in San Francisco, but yes they were, just was really, really coming hard after the Mime Troupe for vulgarity and nudity in places. Not too bad, but just any of it is enough to get the hackles up of this Parks Commission, but we all know who won in the end, don't we? So last appeals 5 weeks ago, the donation was $1 at least. Here it says on here, donation $1.50, and the third one would be donation $2 because they decided to start paying the musicians. So this event happened on a Friday night, December 10th, if I haven't mentioned that yet. And it's funny that the following Monday morning in the San Francisco Chronicle, Ralph J. Gleason really wrote it up and said there were kids and adults, leaping and jumping, dancing, and then Gleason said frigging, fragging, and fruging to a half a dozen rock bands. And he made a really key point. He said that, there were thousands of people attending, digging it, having a great time, who had never heard of the Mime Troupe. Or if they'd heard of the Mime Troupe, certainly hadn't been to one of the events or were a fan and were concerned with donating money to keep the Mime Troupe going or pay the lawyers. They were there to have a good time at a dance concert at the Fillmore with some hot local talent and a couple of nationals too. So Gleason, he really pointed that out, and he went on to really wax about the youth in the Bay Area and their pent-up desire to just let their hair down and partay and have a good time. And yet inside the Fillmore, on Bill Graham's first event, there were no guards, there were no cops, and there was also no trouble. It was just a really well-behaved crowd. Perhaps everybody was so gracious and grateful to be attending this kind of thing. In fact, Gleason really liked to point out that at one point a young female dancer lost her contact lens on the dance floor. And, she got down on her hands and knees looking for it. Well, a dozen other dancers stopped and got down on their hands and knees too. And so they eventually found it. She thanked them and put it in her mouth, licked it, popped it back in her eye, and went right back to dancing. And Gleason ends his review that way. I think he sees it as highly symbolic, and I would agree. Youth. And boy, youth back then in San Francisco in 1965, that's amazing. So there you have it, the Mime Troupe Appeals 2 handbill. There's no calligraphy to credit. The number 1 handbill had a Peter Bailey credit because there was some fancy writing, but here it is just plainly all typeset by the printer, so there's no art credit at all needed for this piece whatsoever. It's just what it is, and what it is Bill Graham's first event, dance concert, ever thrown at the Fillmore Auditorium. Sometimes I want to close a blog by saying and the rest is history, but I'll try to shelve that because who likes cliches, right? Anyway, great piece, great early history, seminal and all that stuff. Hope you enjoyed it. Great fun talking about it today, and we'll see you next time for the next item. Stay tuned. Bye-bye.